The Borderlands series has been one of my many franchises I've wanted to check out for quite a long time, to be honest, and I've never gotten around to doing it, but here we are with the most recent entry, Borderlands 3. Now you may be wondering why I'm playing this one first and not the other two games, and that is just because I wanted the most up-to-date version of the game. This isn't to say the other games look awful, as they aren't, but with the first entry releasing almost 20 years ago, which is nuts, it's safe to say it is becoming quite outdated. The same goes with 2, not as much of course, with it being 12 years old. However, this doesn't mean I won't ever play them because I want to check out all the games no matter the age. And I've reviewed plenty of old games before. Far Cry, Resident Evil 5, Assassin's Creed 2, Batman Arkham Asylum, all of them at least 15 years old. I also heard that this game probably has the best gameplay, but other entries are better in other aspects, so they're on the horizon. Now I had of course heard about Borderlands over the years and had a rough idea of what it was about, but I still wasn't entirely sure what I was getting myself into. So for anyone else who doesn't yet understand, Borderlands is an RPG first-person shooter following looter-shooter gameplay, which is exactly how it sounds. A majority of the gameplay is you looting up and progressively making your gear and inventory stronger as you shoot down enemies, all being set in a giant open world-like setting. I say like because you unlock more sections of the world as you progress through the main story missions, because it's of course filled with a bunch of optional side quests as well, and there is a leveling system which ties into the world and story so that the areas you unlock will include increasingly stronger enemies, meaning it's more of a grind and slow progress game where you take time building gear, completing side missions and exploring the unlocked areas of the world, so then when you are ready you can progress forward and not be thrashed by higher level enemies, similar to No Man's Sky, which I loved. So I had high expectations. Now when you start you actually pick between 4 characters, but you can replace the word characters with class, as that's what they are, but really the person you play as is a Vault Hunter, but they themselves don't actually play a massive role in the story because, as I mentioned, they're basically there as a choice for gameplay. This goes with the whole story itself. The game rather heavily focuses on the gameplay aspect and looter-shooter experience, rather than having a fully fledged narrative. A big part of the story is so you can progress and unlock areas, as I spoke about. Now the gameplay, but more specifically the gunplay, is insane. The amount of customization and experimentation there can be with shooting is really impressive, and it's definitely what makes this game so unique and so good in this genre. I'm not exaggerating when I say there really is endless ways to change your playstyle, which is key for making the game fun and keep the gunplay so fresh after a bunch of hours of playtime. Adding on to the type of game it is, you can play this game for years on end because although the story does come to a close, you can carry on playing or even restart, and it's always so unique and different, therefore never gets old. I think this is also why the franchise has such a massive and active community, for sure. Similar to Skyrim all these years later, there's incredible variation in the weapons and gear, switching up the style as in the shooting mode, you can have burst or full auto, but then that mixed with the various fire rates and ammo, strength, range, appearance, I could go on. And if that wasn't enough, then there's also a giant skill tree system, one of the biggest and customizable I've ever seen in a game. As you progress and level up, you gain skill points to make you and your character's gear stronger, and not only unlocking skills itself with each skill having 5 upgrades towards them, but also the amount of skills you can add, which does stack up over time as your inventory expands. This is what I mean when I say it's an extremely progressive game that you can sink so many hours into. You can really think about how you want to use and upgrade your skills because each one you do feels like they make that much of a difference, or I'm sure many people just wing it and choose random upgrades, which I could honestly say is more fun and unpredictable. The way you actually gain loot is by opening up an abundance of crates. There's just so many, it's insane, as well as dropped weapons from the enemies. As said, there's quite a lot of weapons. Many times they have only a slight increase in stats, and you probably would see yourself spending lots of time managing your inventory, and because you slowly build up your gear over time, it doesn't feel that overwhelming to anyone that might think that, as well as the skills and weapons feeling very easy to get used to. I would say it still might be for some players, maybe the more casual, because there's just so many weapons. Another aspect that makes the gameplay great and so fun is the movement. It's quick, smooth and fun. There's a super jump and the crouch slide is clean to implement. Now I know the narrative is nowhere near the main focus of this game, it just acts as a plot which then explains the gameplay as you're part of a group of Vault Hunters after being recruited by a character called Lilith. These Vault Hunters have a plan of stopping the main villains but also their entire cult they lead, which is COV, meaning Children of the Vault. The two antagonists go by Tyrene and Troy Calypso, but mainly just the Calypso twins. I'd personally say the characters is what lets down the story here, as it's probably one of the most important aspects in a story that isn't isn't that important anyway, because the whole idea is the Vault Hunters traversing through these planets to then build up their crew and stop these antagonists. Therefore the plot itself is quite straightforward and nothing special, so I would say the characters themselves are what should carry it, but unfortunately they also aren't that special. The dialogue is definitely humorous for the most part, which I would say is a bonus, but these characters and NPCs are so exaggerative and pretty annoying for the most part, as they can just be too cringe and way too over the top, especially the Calypso twins, as they're pretty boring themselves and only serve as annoyance, especially for the main villains of the game, but also a majority of the characters you meet. At the end of the day, these characters are there to set a purpose for the gameplay and why the Vault Hunters are traversing through this world. Earlier I mentioned how there's other aspects that other entries get right or just execute better, and from what I've heard the story is one of them, so I'm intrigued to see how the other games hold up in this area. Another area of gameplay is the vehicles and their mechanics. It seems like every aspect of the game is overhauled with customization. It's nowhere near the amount in gunplay, but as you deploy each vehicle at the various spots around the map, which was quite well balanced I must say. There's always one nearby or near a fast travel, so you don't have to sprint around trying to find one. It helps a lot with traversing and keeps up with the speed and action of the game. I say action because the customization allows you to add and manage vehicle weapons before you deploy it, again being unlocked as you progress. Now the actual driving mechanics themselves were a bit odd on keyboard, because you can only control the steering with your mouse instead of keys, which was interesting, and you can't change it, I don't know why. The keybind section itself could have been improved also in many areas. I'd say there's too many locked keybinds, not a massive issue of course. The actual world of Borderlands and its setting looks great. As I mentioned, it's not just one area you visit, there's so many different planets you come across, just like No Man's Sky or Jedi Survivor, each one looking so unique, and of course all following that hand-drawn and dark outline art style, which looks so good. Definitely one of my favourite parts about the Borderlands series even before I started playing. I think even the art cover looks beautiful. I'm so into concept art anyway, so to see that traditional style inside a game as you play through looks great and is so unique. The scenery is so good with lots of motion and animated areas. This art style just enhances that detail in the games, especially because it's clear somebody has drawn that, which I always think to myself when exploring the world. The colours are so great and so vibrant. I also really appreciate the character design in the game, each one looking so unique again. The series always follows a theme of mechanical and scrap parts for not only the world but also the outfit design, though the characters themselves I may not be a fan of, but the design of the Calypso twins were some of my favourites. I think they look so good, and the game's performance held up pretty good on not max but high graphics, but there were several times where the frames dropped a fair bit, which isn't great in such a high pace full action game, but it wasn't like all the time and it didn't significantly take away the immersion. If it was becoming a massive issue then I could have turned down the graphics even more, just an aspect that could have been more of an issue for some, so I thought I'd mention it. And I believe it was a lot worse at launch as expected, so I'm glad they've improved it slightly. And I think that's where I end my review of Borderlands 3 in 2024. I would definitely say this game is worth playing now for sure, and it did exceed my expectations. I didn't think I'd enjoy it or find it that fun before going into it. I'm glad I finally checked it out, and I'm so intrigued to see how the other entries hold up to this one. So if you did enjoy this video or found it helpful, then let me know by tapping that like button down below. And if you like single player games, then that's what this channel is all about. I do videos on a bunch of games with a playlist of a series I've done in the description down below. Thank you for watching until the very end. I'd also like to hear your thoughts on the game or the franchise as a whole, and bye bye.